There are some details in this story that you will not be able to unhear. I'm not saying that to get your attention. I'm saying it because it's true, and because Rachel Mercer, the woman at the center of this story, asked me specifically to say that. She wanted people to know what she went through before they decided whether or not they believed her. On the night of September 14th, 2019, a 3-4-year-old woman named Rachel Mercer sat alone in her kitchen in Portland, Oregon, doing something she had done every single night for the past 4 months. She was listening to voicemails, not new ones, old ones, the same ones, over and over again. Her neighbor Sandra had noticed the light in Rachel's kitchen, staying on until 2, sometimes 3 inches the morning. Sandra had knocked a few times, brought food, sat with her, but Rachel was somewhere else entirely. She was somewhere back in the months before everything happened, back when her husband Daniel would leave her voice messages, just to say nothing important, just to say, "Hey, I'm on my way home. You want Thai food tonight?" I was thinking Thai food. Or, "I forgot to tell you this morning, but you looked really beautiful today. Okay, bye." Rachel had saved every single one, 31 voicemails. She had them memorized. 4 months earlier, Rachel's husband Daniel had died. He was 37 years old, no health problems, no warning signs, nothing. He had simply gone for his morning run one Tuesday in May and never came back. His body was found 2 miles from their house, at the bottom of a hiking trail near the edge of a deep ravine in the hills east of the city. A dog walker had spotted him just after 7 inches the morning. The medical examiner said it was a cardiac event. Sudden, painless. He had likely lost consciousness within seconds and fallen from the trail into the ravine below. The case was closed within 2 weeks. Accidental death. No investigation. No questions asked. And Rachel had been left completely alone in the house they had shared for 9 years, with 31 voicemails and a kitchen light that never turned off. She kept his phone active because she couldn't bring herself to make that call to the carrier. She had started to twice. Both times she had hung up before anyone answered. She paid the bill every month out of their joint account. She told herself she would cancel it eventually. She told herself a lot of things in those 4 months that she never followed through on. She would sometimes call his number just to hear his voicemail greeting. "Hey, this is Daniel. Leave a message, and I'll get back to you." 10 words. She had listened to those 10 words more times than she could count. She knew it was irrational. She knew Daniel wasn't going to call back. She knew she needed to cancel the phone, pack up his office, start seeing the therapist her sister kept recommending. She knew all of this. She didn't care. Then, on the night of September 14th, a Saturday, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold and her phone face up on the table in front of her. She had just finished listening to voicemail number 17 for what was probably the 400th time, and then her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen, and the name she saw was Daniel. Not a notification, not a reminder. An incoming call from Daniel. She stared at it for what felt like a very long time. 4 rings, 5 rings, and then it stopped. She told herself it was a glitch, a contact mislabeled, a pocket dial from someone who had found his old phone, a mistake by the carrier. There were 100 explanations, and every single one of them was reasonable. She let it go to voicemail. She sat there for a full minute, just staring at the notification that appeared at the top of her screen. One new voicemail from Daniel. She put the phone face down on the table. She got up. She poured her cold tea down the drain. She rinsed the mug. She dried it. She put it back in the cabinet. And then she picked up the phone and pressed play. The recording was almost completely silent, just static, low and steady, like the hiss of an old radio between stations. And then, very quietly, almost underneath the static, she heard breathing, slow, deliberate, close to the microphone. It lasted exactly 11 seconds, and then the call ended. Rachel stood in her kitchen for a long time, without moving. She deleted the voicemail. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself she was tired, and grieving, and reading things into static. She went to bed, but she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, and stared at the ceiling, and listened to the house. The refrigerator hum, the pipes settling, the wind against the window. Normal sounds. Sounds she had heard 10,000 times before. But that night, every single one of them sounded different. The next morning, Rachel called the phone carrier. She told them she was calling about her husband's account. She explained that he had passed away 4 months ago, and that the phone was in her possession, locked in his desk drawer. She asked if there had been any activity on the account recently. The representative put her on hold for a moment, and then came back, and then paused. Mrs. Mercer. Another pause. This phone made an outgoing call last night at 11:47 p.m. The call lasted 14 seconds. It was placed to your number. Rachel didn't say anything. She was doing the math in her head. She had heard 11 seconds of breathing, then a few seconds of silence before the call cut off. 14 seconds. Is there anything else I can help you with today? The representative asked. Rachel hung up. She walked upstairs to Daniel's office. The desk was exactly as he had left it. She had not moved a single thing. His notebooks were stacked in the same corner. His coffee mug was still there. The framed photo of the two of them at the coast 3 summers ago was still facing his chair, the way it always had. She opened the top drawer. Inside was a phone charger, 2 pens, a receipt from a hardware store, and nothing else. Daniel's phone was gone. Rachel called the police that morning. The officer came to the house and took a report. He was polite. He was patient. He also very clearly did not believe that anything unusual was happening. He suggested she check other drawers, other rooms. He suggested that grief can affect memory in significant ways. He said he would file the report, but that without evidence of a break-in, there wasn't much they could do. Rachel thanked him. She watched his car pull out of the driveway, and then she went back inside and checked every drawer in every room in the house. The phone was not there. That night, Rachel didn't go to bed at all. She sat in the kitchen with every light in the house on. She had her phone on the table in front of her, and Daniel's old laptop open beside it. She was going back through his emails, his calendar, his files, looking for something. She didn't know what. She just had a feeling that had been building quietly in the back of her mind since the phone call the night before, a feeling that something about the story of Daniel's death wasn't right. At 11:46 p.m. she looked up from the laptop screen. She looked at her phone. She watched the clock turn to 11:47. Her phone rang. Same name on the screen. Daniel. This time she answered immediately. She didn't say hello. She didn't say anything. She just listened. Silence. Deep and total and absolute. And then from somewhere inside that silence, she heard a sound. She recognized immediately. It was specific, unmistakable. It was the creak of the third step on her staircase, the one that had always made that sound, no matter how carefully you stepped on it. The one directly outside her bedroom door. Rachel stood up from the table so fast, her chair fell backwards. She grabbed the kitchen knife off the counter, and she stood there in the middle of her kitchen, not moving, not breathing, listening. The house was completely silent. She stood there for 40 minutes before she moved. The staircase was empty. Every room was empty. Every window was locked. Every door was locked. She called the police again. 2 officers came this time. They searched the house. They found nothing. One of them gently suggested she might want to speak to someone professional. Rachel looked at him, and she said very calmly, "I know what I heard. What happened over the following 2 weeks changed everything about this case, and I want to take this part slowly, because the details matter." A detective named Harris had been following local news coverage of Daniel Mercer's death, not because anything had flagged initially, but because 3 months after, Daniel's case was closed. Another man had died on that same trail, same general area, same cause of death listed, cardiac event. He was 41 years old. No health problems. No warning signs. His wife had reported something unusual in the weeks before his death. She said her husband had become convinced someone was watching their house. He had changed the locks twice. He had started parking 2 streets away and walking home. He had told her that he felt like something was wrong, but he couldn't explain what. And then one Tuesday morning, he went for a run and never came back. Detective Harris requested the full files on both cases, and when he put them side by side, he noticed something that no one had caught before. Both men had taken out significant life insurance policies within the same 12-month window, Both policies had the same broker. Both wives had filed claims within days of their husbands' deaths. One claim had been paid out. Rachel's was still pending. Harris ran the broker's name. What came back stopped him completely. The broker's name was Daniel Reeves, not Daniel Mercer. But here is where it gets strange. Daniel Reeves had the same date of birth as Daniel Mercer, same height, same build, same general physical description, and Daniel Reeves had a criminal record, fraud, identity theft, and one charge that had been dropped due to lack of evidence: conspiracy to commit murder. Harris drove to Rachel's house that evening. He sat across from her at the kitchen table. He asked her very carefully how well she had known her husband before they got married. Rachel looked at him. She said they had met at a conference in Seattle. He had told her he was from Portland originally, that his parents were both deceased, that he had no siblings, that he had moved around a lot for work before settling down. Harris nodded slowly. He asked her if she had ever met anyone from Daniel's life before she came into it. Rachel thought about it, and she realized, for the first time, that the answer was no. Not one person, not a childhood friend, not a former colleague, not a distant cousin. In 9 years of marriage, she had never met a single person who had known Daniel before she did. Harris showed her a photograph. It was a driver's license photo. He asked her if she recognized the man. Rachel looked at it for a long time. The hair was different. The name was different. But the eyes... She looked up at Harris, and she said, "That's my husband." What investigators uncovered over the next several weeks, I will not rush through, because each piece of it landed like something physical. For Rachel, Daniel Mercer was not his real name. He had assumed that identity 11 years earlier, using documents obtained through a fraud network operating out of 3 states. His real name was David Caro. He had a history stretching back nearly 15 years of targeting recently widowed or divorced women, building relationships with them, marrying them in some cases, and then systematically positioning himself to benefit from their deaths. In 2 previous cases, involving women in Nevada and Colorado, the husbands had died under similar circumstances, both on trails, both ruled accidental, both heavily insured. David Caro had been the insurance broker in both cases. He had collected, he had disappeared, he had resurfaced somewhere else with a new name and a new face in the background of someone else's life. But here is the part that Rachel could not, and still cannot fully process. David Caro was not dead. The body found at the bottom of the ravine in May was identified through dental records as a man named Glenn Foster, a transient, a man with no family, no one who would ask questions, a man whose disappearance would generate no investigation whatsoever. David Caro had staged his own death. He had been waiting for Rachel's grief to reach a point where she would sign paperwork she might not look at too carefully, waiting for the insurance claim to process. And in the meantime, he had been watching. The phone calls were confirmed through cell tower data. He had been within half a mile of the house on both nights he called. The creaking step Rachel heard through the phone. He had been inside the house. He had a key. He had always had a key. Rachel was asked later if there was ever a moment when she felt something was off. She thought about it for a long time. She said yes. She said there was one night, about 2 years into their marriage, when she had woken up at 3 inches the morning and Daniel was not in bed. She had gone downstairs and found him sitting at the kitchen table, in the dark, just sitting there. She had asked him what was wrong. He had looked at her for a moment, like he was deciding something, and then he had smiled and said he just couldn't sleep. And she had believed him, because that is what you do. When you love someone, you believe them. David Caro was arrested in a motel in Northern California. 6 weeks after the investigation began, he did not resist. He sat down across from the detectives, and he was calm, almost relaxed. He confirmed everything. He seemed to find it interesting that the phone calls had been what unraveled it. He said he had made them to test something. He said he wanted to know how she was doing. The detective asked him what he meant by that. Caro looked at him and said, "I still cared about her. That part was always real." Rachel was in the room when she was told this. She listened to it. She didn't say anything. She picked up her bag. She thanked the detectives. She walked out to her car. She sat in the parking lot for a long time, and then she drove home to the house, where every window was lit up the way she had left it. She walked into the kitchen. She made a cup of tea. She sat down at the table, and she deleted every single voicemail, all 31 of them, one by one, until her phone was empty. David Caro was convicted on multiple charges, including fraud, identity theft, and 2 counts of murder related to the deaths in Nevada and Colorado. The investigation into Glenn Foster's death was ruled homicide. A 3rd charge was added. He is currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences. Rachel sold the house. 6 months after the trial ended, she moved to a small town on the Oregon coast. She has a dog now. She leaves the kitchen light off at night, and she has not saved a single voicemail since. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because we have more, and they only get darker.